They say you've changed, that you're distant now, that you think too much. You look around and realize you no longer fit where you once did. The conversations that used to entertain you now feel empty. The ambitions that once fueled you now seem hollow. And the people who once understood you now look at you with quiet concern, as if something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. You're not broken. You're awakening. Owen Hermstring wrote, "The first stage of awakening is not joy, it's disorientation." And he's right. When awareness first touches your mind, it doesn't feel like enlightenment, it feels like loss, because clarity burns. It burns illusions, false identities, and comfortable lies. And when the smoke clears, what remains looks unfamiliar. You start to see patterns in yourself, in others, in the world. The manipulation that once went unnoticed now screams at you. You see how people chase validation to fill emotional voids, how they confuse busyness for purpose, how they wear smiles as armor. You watch conversations filled with words but devoid of meaning. You sense fear disguised as ambition, control disguised as love, distraction disguised as happiness, and suddenly the world doesn't make sense anymore. You used to call it life. Now you see it for what it is, a collective trance. And because you're waking up, you start questioning everything. Your job, your relationships, your beliefs, your goals. You feel lost, not because you've lost direction, but because you've stopped following the map someone else drew for you. This is the moment society calls a breakdown. Hermstring says it's the exact opposite. It's a breakthrough. The system was designed to make you feel crazy when you start seeing clearly, because when you question the illusion, you threaten it. And that's why awakening feels like brokenness. You're not malfunctioning. You're simply no longer compatible with the version of reality that most people have accepted as normal. But the hardest part isn't seeing. It's being seen after you've seen. People around you notice the difference. They feel your energy shift even if they can't explain it. You're quieter now. You listen more. You smile less. But your silence carries weight. And they mistake that stillness for sadness, that depth for depression. They don't understand that you're not mourning life, you're mourning illusion. Hermstring wrote, "Awakening is the art of dying while still alive." You're dying to the roles that no longer fit. The friend who always said yes, the employee who played along, the partner who kept peace by suppressing truth. Those versions of you are dissolving. And because the world only knows how to love your mask, it panics when it disappears. You'll be told to lighten up, to be normal, to stop overthinking. But what they really mean is, come back to sleep with us. You won't. You can't. Because once you've seen, you can't unsee. The tragedy of awakening is that awareness isolates before it liberates. You're learning to see what others refuse to acknowledge. You'll sit in rooms and feel the energy of conversations instead of their words. You'll sense the anxiety beneath the laughter, the tension beneath politeness, and it will exhaust you, not because you're weak, but because you're finally feeling life unfiltered. Hermstring calls this energetic sensitivity, the second sight that appears when illusions fall away. It's not madness, it's mastery in progress. The world will label it too emotional, too intense, too deep, but that's because they've forgotten how to feel. Awakening hurts because truth demands honesty, and honesty dismantles comfort. You'll question your career and realize you've been trading freedom for security. You'll look at your relationships and see how much of them were built on fear of loneliness, not love. You'll examine your beliefs and discover they were never yours. They were borrowed, conditioned, inherited, and in that moment, everything you thought you knew about yourself collapses. You feel empty, lost, raw. Hermstring said, "The soul doesn't evolve through addition, but subtraction. You're not losing your mind, you're losing your programming. This stage is brutal, yes, but it's also sacred. The confusion you feel is your mind detoxing from illusion. The pain you feel is your ego dying. The loneliness you feel is the silence truth requires to rebuild you. You're not falling apart, you're falling into alignment. But here's what no one tells you. Awakening doesn't make you better than others. It simply makes you responsible. You can no longer play blind. You can no longer participate in what you now recognize as self-betrayal. You can no longer swallow lies just to keep peace. That responsibility is heavy, and that's why the awakened often look broken to the asleep. Because in a society that glorifies denial, truth looks like dysfunction. Emotional honesty looks like weakness. Slowing down looks like failure. And stillness looks like depression. But Hermstring's words echo, you are not breaking, you are recalibrating to truth. So the next time someone says, you've changed, smile. You have. You've stopped living by borrowed beliefs. You've stopped confusing pleasure with peace. You've stopped performing your pain to be accepted. You've chosen awareness, and awareness costs everything false. And yes, it's lonely. But that loneliness is not a void. It's the space truth creates to build something real. You're not broken. You're just seeing what they can't yet. So hold on to your clarity. Don't rush to fill the silence. Don't explain yourself to those who haven't asked the right questions. Because the moment their eyes begin to open, they'll remember how you looked and realize you weren't broken at all. You were just awake. They told you that you were too sensitive, that you took things too personally, that you felt too much. And you believed them. You tried to toughen up, to grow a thicker skin, to not care so deeply, but it never worked, did it? No matter how hard you tried to ignore, detach, or play it cool, you kept feeling everything. The tension in a room, the sadness behind someone's smile, the unspoken pain behind polite words. You thought something was wrong with you, but Owen Hermstring says the opposite is true. Sensitivity is not weakness. It's energetic literacy. You were never too emotional. You were simply fluent in a language others have forgotten, the language of energy. Most people live disconnected from their own feelings. They don't feel, they react, they suppress, numb, escape, distract. They drown silence with noise and call it living. But you've never had that luxury. You feel the vibration behind the noise. You sense the storm behind the calm. You feel truth, raw, heavy, unfiltered. That's why you can't lie to yourself for long. That's why small talk exhausts you and dishonesty physically hurts. Your body reacts to energy long before your mind can justify it. When you meet someone whose words and energy don't match, you sense it immediately, and it drains you. Because energy never lies, even when people do. Hermstring calls this the empathic curse before it becomes a gift. In its untrained form, sensitivity feels like chaos. You absorb everyone's moods, pain, and tension until you can't tell what's yours anymore. You feel everything, and it's overwhelming. You carry emotions that don't belong to you, responsibility that isn't yours, and guilt for being too much. But here's the truth. You were never meant to carry other people's energy. You were meant to read it. The difference between burden and mastery is awareness. Hermstring wrote, empathy without boundaries is self-destruction disguised as kindness. You're not supposed to absorb every emotion you feel. You're supposed to interpret it, understand it, and let it pass through you. That's your power, your ability to sense what others suppress. It's what makes you intuitive, creative, healing. It's why people confide in you without knowing why. It's why animals trust you, why strangers tell you their secrets. Your energy says, I see you, and for a moment they feel safe to be human. But the tragedy is that most empaths never reach that level of mastery because they spend their lives trying to shut down their gift. Society doesn't value feeling, it values functioning. You're rewarded for endurance, not empathy, for efficiency, not emotional honesty. And so you learn to see your sensitivity as a flaw to fix instead of a gift to refine. Hermstring wrote, the world numbs its pain by calling sensitivity weakness, because sensitivity exposes the pain it refuses to feel. That's why people mocked you for being too emotional. You were their mirror. You made them see what they've spent years avoiding. Your feelings made their denial uncomfortable, and rather than confront themselves, they tried to silence you. But that silence, that self-censorship, is what kills empaths. You start minimizing yourself to fit into emotional desserts. You start laughing at jokes that hurt your soul. You start pretending you don't care, just to blend in. But your energy knows better. Every time you fake indifference, your frequency drops. Every time you suppress truth, your body tightens. Every time you play numb, your light dims. The turning point comes when you realize that your sensitivity was never meant to make you fragile. It was meant to make you free. Because to feel deeply is to live deeply. To sense what others can't is to navigate life with a different kind of intelligence. Energetic intelligence. It's what Hermstring called the compass of the soul. When you listen to your sensitivity, it guides you toward alignment. When you ignore it, you get sick, drained, lost. Think about it. How many times did you feel something was wrong but ignored it? That off energy in a relationship, that subtle heaviness in a job, that tension before a betrayal. Your body warned you, your energy spoke, but your mind, trained by a numb world, overruled it, and you paid the price. But now you know better. You know that sensitivity isn't a flaw to suppress. It's an instrument to tune. You're not meant to desensitize. You're meant to discern. You can learn to feel without absorbing, to love without losing, to observe without reacting. Hermstring said, sensitivity becomes strength the moment you stop apologizing for it. When you finally stop explaining your emotions to people who've forgotten how to feel, something shifts. You stop trying to convince them of your value. You stop defending your empathy. You simply live it, unapologetically. And as you do, your energy becomes precise. You no longer attract chaos because you no longer resonate with it. You begin choosing peace not as avoidance, but as power. You walk into rooms and change their vibration, not by speaking, but by being. That's your real gift, presence. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that calms. Not the kind that fixes, but the kind that heals. You'll always feel more than others. That's your design. But the more you embrace it, the less it hurts, because your sensitivity isn't here to break you. It's here to guide you. It's your inner radar for truth in a world built on pretense. So no, you're not too emotional. You're just living in a society that's forgotten how to feel. And the moment you stop apologizing for your depth, your sensitivity stops being a curse and starts becoming your superpower. Because you were never meant to toughen up. You were meant to light up. You've probably noticed it. The more you grow, the more people around you react. You start speaking differently, thinking differently, choosing differently, and suddenly the people who once celebrated you begin to question you. They say you've changed, that you've become distant, arrogant, or too spiritual. Some withdraw quietly, others challenge you directly, but none of it is random. Owen Hermstring called this the mirror effect. He said, awareness doesn't provoke, it reflects. When you awaken, you stop matching other people's illusions. You no longer participate in the energetic dance of denial. And because of that, your very presence becomes uncomfortable to those still attached to the false self. You don't have to preach or correct. Your vibration alone exposes the dissonance in theirs. That's the price of awakening, not rejection for who you are, but rejection for what you reflect. Most people spend their lives protecting their image. They build identities out of pain, pride, and projection. They cling to their opinions as proof of control. But when you start living from truth, those false identities begin to crumble, not just in you, but in those who interact with you. Because your authenticity challenges their performance. Your peace confronts their chaos. Your stillness reveals their noise. Hermstring wrote, the light doesn't fight the dark. It simply reveals what the dark has been hiding. And that's exactly what your awareness does. it reveals. It's not your words that offend them, it's your energy. They sense your detachment from illusion and mistake it for judgment. They feel your refusal to engage in old emotional games and interpret it as coldness. But you're not rejecting them. You're just no longer agreeing to the energetic terms of unconscious connection. You see, every relationship has an unspoken contract, a shared vibration that defines its balance. Some are built on mutual healing, others on mutual avoidance. When your vibration changes, that contract dissolves, and when the other person hasn't evolved with you, they panic. They accuse you of leaving, betraying, or abandoning them. But what's really happening is that your frequency no longer validates their comfort zone. This is why the awakened are often misunderstood. You become a living mirror, one that reflects both light and shadow. You show people the truth they sense but suppress. You remind them of everything they've avoided feeling, and not everyone is ready for that reflection. Hermstring said, "The awakened are mirrors, the unawakened are magnets. One reflects truth, the other attracts validation. And the moment you stop magnetizing validation, you start reflecting truth. And that reflection disturbs the sleeping. Because to see you clearly, they'd have to see themselves clearly too. The most painful part. It's not strangers who react this way. It's the people closest to you. Friends who once laughed with you now avoid eye contact. Family members who once trusted your voice now question your sanity. Lovers who once adored your sensitivity now call you difficult. You'll feel the sting of separation, not because you've done something wrong, but because your clarity has made them see their own confusion. And that's the essence of the mirror effect. Awareness changes the emotional chemistry of every connection. You can't awaken in isolation. Your transformation ripples outward. You become the test that reveals the depth of others' denial. So what do you do when your truth triggers the people you love? Hermstring's answer was simple but hard. Don't close your eyes to make others comfortable. You're not here to convince or correct. You're here to embody. The mirror doesn't chase people. It simply stands still and reflects. You can't heal someone who's fighting to stay asleep. You can't awaken those who mistake darkness for safety. Your only responsibility is to keep your reflection clean, to live your truth with integrity, humility, and compassion. That doesn't mean you stop loving them. On the contrary, you begin to love them correctly. You stop enabling their blindness. You stop participating in their chaos. You love them from distance if needed, because true compassion doesn't mean lowering your frequency. It means holding it steady until they remember their own. But let's be honest, it hurts. It hurts when people misinterpret your silence as arrogance, your boundaries as rejection, your solitude as sadness. It hurts when you see their potential but can't make them see it. Hermstring called this the ache of awakened empathy. It's the pain of understanding without being understood. Yet that pain is sacred. It teaches detachment without bitterness. You learn to accept that not everyone who started with you is meant to evolve with you. You learn to stop trying to explain your journey to those still living by sight. You learn to walk forward with compassion, but without compromise. Because your awareness is not meant to please. It's meant to purify. And sometimes that purification happens through loss. The people who can't face their reflection will leave, but those who can, those brave enough to see themselves in your eyes, will grow. And those are the souls meant to walk beside you. Hermstring said, when you reflect light without ego, those ready to awaken will find themselves in your glow. So don't dim your awareness just to keep peace. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to remind. Every trigger you cause is a silent invitation for someone else to rise. Yes, being the mirror is lonely. Yes, it costs you love, comfort, and belonging. But it also gives you something far greater: truth, integrity, and freedom. because the mirror sees what the world denies. And while that vision isolates you for a time, it's also what makes you the light in a room full of eyes still closed. You're not the problem, you're the reflection. And eventually, even those who turned away will come looking for the light they once feared to see. From the moment you were born, you were told to fit in, to behave, to be polite, to not question too much, to sit quietly in classrooms, nod when spoken to, and measure your worth in grades, productivity, and approval. You were taught to survive, not to feel, to perform, not to live, to follow the script and call it success. Owen Hermstring wrote, "What society calls normal is simply the most accepted form of dysfunction." And he's right. Look around. Most people aren't living, they're coping. They wake up already tired, chase things they don't want, buy things they don't need, and call that stability. They mistake routine for peace and numbness for strength. They don't question it because everyone else is doing the same. But what happens when you start seeing through that illusion, when the normal that everyone worships starts to feel like poison? You start to wake up, and the world calls you broken. Because the system is designed to label awareness as dysfunction. It can't tolerate depth, because depth questions, depth feels, depth disrupts the sleep that keeps everything running. Hermstring said, "Awareness threatens the machinery of illusion, and that's why society teaches you to hide your depth. From an early age, you were punished for authenticity. When you cried, you were told to stop. When you questioned rules, you were told to obey. When you showed too much passion, you were called dramatic. When you spoke truth, you were told to be quiet. Slowly, you learned that safety lives in suppression. You buried your intuition under performance. You traded your voice for validation. You became exactly what the system needed, predictable. You stopped expressing what you really felt and instead started editing yourself to fit what was acceptable. You laughed when something wasn't funny, smiled when you wanted to scream, and agreed when you wanted to walk away. You dimmed your energy just to be liked. And for a while, it worked. You fit in, you got praised, you were normal. But you also felt empty, because every time you traded truth for belonging, a piece of your soul went silent. Hermstring wrote, "The greatest prison is not built of walls, but of social expectations. And that's where most people live, locked inside invisible rules that dictate who they can be." They talk about freedom, but fear authenticity, because authenticity makes others uncomfortable. It exposes their numbness. It forces them to confront their own compromises. That's why the world rewards conformity and punishes consciousness. It calls obedience maturity and compliance success. It tells you to be yourself, but only if yourself fits the mold. It loves originality until it threatens control. But when you start breaking the mold, when you stop performing and start living, people don't see courage. They see rebellion. They'll say you've lost your way when in truth you finally found it. Hermstring said, "In a world that measures sanity by conformity, clarity will always look like chaos. That's why you feel misunderstood. You're no longer hypnotized by the rituals of the asleep, the gossip, the constant scrolling, the endless chase for status. You start craving silence, depth, authenticity. You start realizing that most socializing is just noise, people trying to fill the void that silence would expose. And you begin to see how society weaponizes shame to control you. It tells you that slowing down is lazy, that sensitivity is weakness, that solitude is loneliness. But it's all manipulation. Because a person who feels deeply and thinks independently is impossible to control. So you learn to play small, to act fine, to shrink your awareness so others don't feel threatened by it. But that shrinking doesn't save you. It suffocates you. You can't pretend to be asleep once your soul has tasted awakening. And that's when you face a choice. Do you go back to being normal, or do you dare to be real? Being real means losing comfort. It means walking away from conversations that no longer feed your spirit. It means saying no when silence would be easier. It means disappointing others to stop disappointing yourself. It means choosing truth, even when it costs you approval. Hermstring called that energetic rebellion, the act of living awake in a world built for sleep. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet defiance. You stop feeding the system your attention, your fear, your energy. You stop reacting, you start observing, you become conscious, and the moment you do, the world starts shifting around you. You stop chasing meaning because you realize you are meaning. You stop seeking purpose because your presence itself becomes purpose. You stop craving acceptance because authenticity feels better than approval ever did. This is the death of normal. And yes, it's lonely at first, and because you're walking away from a frequency most people never leave. But soon, you begin to attract others who live from truth too. People who don't fear silence, who don't need masks, who don't want to fix you because they've learned to love what's real. Hermstring wrote, "When you stop trying to be normal, you start becoming whole." Because normal was never the goal. It was the disguise, so stop apologizing for your depth. Stop trying to shrink your awareness to fit the comfort of the shallow. The world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs people brave enough to see through the illusion and stay awake in it. You're not strange. You're not dramatic. You're not broken. You're just unwilling to play a role in a play that no longer feels real. And that's not rebellion. That's rebirth. Reality doesn't change when you awaken. Your frequency does. And once it does, you stop perceiving life through the same filter as everyone else. You begin to see patterns that others can't, truth that others won't, and energy that most are too numb to sense. That's what Owen Hermstring called the Law of Perceptual Frequency. The understanding that you don't see reality as it is, you see it as you are. Most people view life through the fog of fear, habit, and conditioning. Their perception is filtered through collective programming, the beliefs they inherited, the fears they absorbed, the lies they learned to live with. They think they're choosing freely, but they're not. They're reacting to the vibration they've been conditioned to stay in. Hermstring wrote, "Your vibration is your lens, and your lens defines your limits." When your frequency rises, so does your awareness. You start noticing things that used to be invisible. The manipulation in marketing, the desperation in competition, the emptiness behind success. You see how society functions like a trance. Everyone running, no one asking why. But here's the paradox. The higher your awareness, the harder it becomes to explain what you see. You try to share your insights, but people look at you with polite confusion. They don't feel what you feel because they're tuned to a different frequency. It's like trying to describe color to someone who's only seen in grayscale. They don't reject you because you're wrong. They reject you because they can't yet perceive it. Hermstring said, "You can only meet people at the frequency they're willing to see from." And that truth hurts. You realize that perception isn't intelligence, it's vibration. Two people can live in the same world but experience entirely different realities simply because one is awake and the other is asleep. That's why you feel misunderstood. That's why normal conversations bore you. That's why the news, the drama, the endless noise all start feeling like static. You're no longer aligned with the vibration of confusion. You're tuned into clarity. And clarity doesn't need chaos to make sense. But this new perception comes with a cost. You begin to see how deeply the world feeds off illusion. You see how fear keeps people compliant, how comparison keeps them consuming, how distraction keeps them asleep. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending that unconsciousness is normal. And that's where isolation sneaks in. Not because you've left the world, but because you've outgrown its illusions. You start moving differently. You stop needing to be right. You stop arguing with ignorance. You stop fighting to prove what you already know. You realize that truth doesn't need validation. It needs embodiment. Hermstring said, "When you raise your vibration, your perception expands faster than your language." That's why awakening often feels lonely. You can't articulate what's shifted, only that something has. The same conversations feel smaller. The same routines feel heavier. You're not being dramatic, you're being recalibrated. The law of perceptual frequency teaches that consciousness evolves in layers. At lower frequencies, you perceive through survival. How can I protect myself? At higher frequencies, you perceive through creation. How can I express my truth? And eventually, you reach the state of unity. How can I serve without losing myself? Every level comes with a new kind of clarity and a new kind of loneliness. Because each time your frequency rises, you leave behind a version of yourself and a circle of people who resonated with that vibration. Not out of cruelty, but out of energetic law. You can't resonate with what you've transcended, and yet that loss isn't punishment, it's purification. Hermstring wrote, "Perception refines as vibration rises. Confusion falls away because it can no longer attach. That's why, even though awakening feels isolating, it's actually your consciousness untangling from the collective fog. The danger, though, is arrogance. When you start seeing clearly, it's easy to believe you're above others. But that's ego disguised as awareness. The truly awakened don't judge. They observe. They understand that everyone is perceiving from the level they're capable of maintaining. That's why Hermstring warned, don't confuse expanded perception with superiority. The higher the vibration, the deeper the humility. When you embody this truth, compassion becomes natural. You stop resenting the sleepers. You remember that you were once one of them. You stop trying to force awakening onto others. You live your clarity quietly, radiating it through presence instead of persuasion. And something beautiful happens. The more you stabilize your frequency, the more the world begins to respond differently to you. You attract truth where you once attracted confusion. You meet depth where you once met drama. You feel guided, synchronized, aligned. Life begins to mirror your inner vibration with precision. That's the secret Hermstring revealed. The universe isn't testing you, it's matching you. Every situation, every person, every challenge reflects the frequency you're operating on. Change your vibration and your reality shifts. Not because the external changed, but because your lens did. So the next time you feel misunderstood, don't shrink your perception to fit their comfort. Don't dim your awareness to be accepted. You were not meant to live inside the collective fog. You were meant to illuminate it. Yes, seeing beyond the collective lens will isolate you for a while. But eventually, that isolation becomes illumination. The silence becomes strength. The difference becomes destiny. You're not crazy for seeing what others don't. You're not detached. You're evolving. You're not arrogant. You're awake. And while the world continues to spin in confusion, you're learning to see clearly, not as the crowd does, but as consciousness does. That's not delusion, that's expansion. Because, as Hermstring said, once your frequency changes, the world doesn't look the same, because you're no longer the same observer. You see the hypocrisy of the world, how people glorify virtue but act from fear, how they talk about love but trade it for control, how they praise truth but attack whoever speaks it. You start feeling disgusted, frustrated, impatient. You look at those still asleep and think, why can't they see what I see? That's when awakening becomes dangerous, because awareness without compassion becomes arrogance. Integration is the process of softening your clarity, not to make it smaller, but to make it human. It's learning how to carry light without burning everyone around you. It's realizing that truth isn't meant to isolate you, it's meant to refine you. Hermstring said, your first awakening frees you from illusion, your second frees you from superiority. Because what good is seeing clearly if it only teaches you to look down on others? What good is truth if it builds a wall around your heart? You have to remember, everyone is perceiving from the level of consciousness they can handle. The ones who still sleep are not your enemies, they're your teachers. They show you patience, humility, and empathy in ways comfort never could. They remind you that the point of awakening isn't to separate from humanity, it's to heal your relationship with it. But integration hurts. It demands that you return to the world you've outgrown, not to belong to it, but to serve it. It's easier to stay detached, to look at everyone else as lost. It's harder to stand in the middle of the noise and remain silent inside. You'll be tested in every possible way. The universe will send people who trigger your old wounds, not to punish you, but to see if you've truly healed. The same conversations, the same dynamics, the same patterns will reappear, only now you have awareness, and awareness makes repetition painful. Hermstring wrote, "The same storm only returns when you still carry the same thunder. If you're still reacting, still judging, still trying to convince, it means your truth hasn't yet settled into peace." You may know more, but knowledge without embodiment is still ego. Integration requires humility, the kind that whispers, "I can see differently, but I'm still learning to live kindly." It's choosing to stay open when your mind wants to shut down. It's forgiving those who don't understand, even when they mock what they can't grasp. It's smiling at ignorance, not because you approve of it, but because you no longer feed it your energy. But make no mistake, integration is not weakness. It's mastery. It's the quiet strength of someone who could fight but chooses not to, someone who could expose but chooses to understand, someone who could argue but chooses to embody. That's not passivity, that's energetic sovereignty. Because when you truly integrate, you stop needing to prove your awareness. You stop talking about energy. You become it. You stop preaching about vibration. You live it. People start feeling your presence more than your words. Hermstring said, "When truth is embodied, language becomes optional." Integration also means accepting paradox, that light and dark exist together, that ignorance and wisdom are both part of evolution, that even those who hurt you are expressions of the same source trying to find itself. You begin to see that the chaos of the world is not a failure of consciousness. It's the process of it waking up. And that realization changes everything. You stop taking things personally. You stop resenting the asleep. You stop seeing life as something happening to you and start recognizing it as something happening for you. Every conflict becomes a mirror, every delay a lesson, every pain an initiation. Hermstring called this emotional alchemy, the ability to turn discomfort into understanding, to transform frustration into patience, to convert isolation into inner strength. You no longer resist what is, you transmute it. But here's the real sign that you've integrated your awakening. You can walk into the same places that once drained you and remain untouched. You can listen to noise without losing your silence. You can face the asleep without losing your compassion. You no longer absorb the energy around you. You anchor it. That's when awakening matures into wisdom. You stop chasing purity and start embodying balance. You realize that the goal was never to escape duality, but to hold it without collapsing. You can feel anger and still choose peace. You can see ignorance and still choose love. Hermstring said, "When you can stand in the fire without the need to preach, you've integrated the flame." That's what integration is, being light among shadow without declaring war on darkness, walking among illusion without losing your authenticity, loving people as they are while still seeing who they could be. And that's how you know you've grown, when your truth no longer needs to be loud because it's become your natural state. So don't let your awakening make you bitter. Don't let your clarity harden into judgment. Let it soften into wisdom. Because the world doesn't need more preachers of truth, it needs examples of peace. And maybe that's the quiet secret of awakening. The real test isn't how much you see, it's how gently you walk with what you now know. At some point, the chaos ends. Not because the world gets quieter, but because you do. The noise that once pulled you into conflict loses its grip. The opinions that used to sting no longer reach your core. The illusions you fought against no longer need your resistance. You've stopped battling the dream because you've remembered you were never trapped in it. This is the moment Owen Hermstring called the return as light. He wrote, "The final stage of awakening isn't escape, it's embodiment. You don't leave the world, you walk back into it with new eyes. You return not as a preacher of truth, but as a presence of it. You stop trying to convince others to wake up. You live awake among them. You become what Hermstring described as a quiet frequency of coherence in a loud world of confusion. That's what true authenticity is. Not performance, not perfection, but energetic alignment. You no longer need to explain who you are, because everything about your vibration already speaks it. You don't force change. Your existence becomes the proof that change is possible. But living authentically in a world that still sleeps is not easy. Every day tests your integrity. You'll encounter manipulation disguised as love, noise disguised as purpose, and distraction disguised as joy. The collective will still try to pull you back into its trance, not because it's evil, but because it's unconscious. And you must remember, your job is not to fight unconsciousness, but to remain conscious within it. Hermstring said, "The awakened do not preach to the blind. They walk in such light that the blind begin to see." That's how transformation spreads, not through confrontation, but through vibration. You don't need to expose others' illusions. You only need to stop living in your own. But this requires courage. The courage to stay soft in a hard world, to stay honest when lies are easier, to stay awake when everyone else is sleepwalking. It's the courage to live with open eyes and an open heart, to love deeply while seeing clearly. You'll be tempted to retreat into isolation, to protect your peace by avoiding humanity altogether. But Hermstring warned against that. Light that hides in mountains forgets its purpose. You weren't meant to escape life, you were meant to elevate it. Your peace was never meant to be private, it was meant to ripple outward. Living authentically means showing up fully. At work, in love, in pain, in presence. It means speaking truth even when your voice shakes, setting boundaries without guilt, forgiving without forgetting. It means letting your energy teach louder than your words ever could. But authenticity also means embracing imperfection. Awakening doesn't make you flawless. It makes you real. You'll still make mistakes, still fall into old patterns, still forget and remember again. That's part of being human. And being human is not the opposite of being divine. It's the expression of it. Hermstring wrote, "The awakened one's humility is their greatest light." Because once you realize that everyone, even those still lost in illusion, is part of the same consciousness, searching for itself, judgment dissolves. You no longer see us and them. You just see stages of remembering. You understand that some are just earlier in the process and some later, but all are walking the same path home. And when you truly understand that, compassion returns. You can walk through a crowded city and feel peace. You can listen to someone lie and still love them. You can watch the world destroy itself and still hold faith that it's all unfolding as it must. You stop needing control because you've surrendered to alignment. Hermstring said, "Awakening ends not in rebellion, but in reverence." Reverence for existence itself, for the strange beauty of this human experience, the joy and the pain, the noise and the silence, the blindness and the breakthroughs. You see that none of it was wasted. Every heartbreak, every loss, every moment of loneliness was a doorway to deeper truth. And you realize that awakening was never about escaping suffering. It was about understanding it. You no longer fear discomfort, because you see it as the universe speaking in the language of growth. You no longer seek perfection, because you know presence is enough. Living authentically in a sleeping world means walking in light without arrogance, in truth without cruelty, in love without naivety. It's a delicate balance, to stay awake and still care, to stay clear and still connect. But that's what mastery looks like. You're no longer reactive, you're responsive. You no longer seek attention, you radiate intention. You no longer demand understanding, you embody it. You'll start to notice something subtle. People are drawn to your energy. Not because you say anything profound, but because your calm feels like home. You become a mirror for the version of themselves they've forgotten. You awaken others not through teaching, but through being. That's how light works. It doesn't speak, it shines. And in time, you'll realize that the whole journey, the confusion, the loneliness, the isolation, the awakening, was never meant to make you special. It was meant to make you whole, to strip you of illusion until what remained was love, fierce, unconditional, alive. So walk gently, but walk boldly. Don't hide your light to protect the sleeping. Don't dim your truth to fit the dark. You were not born to conform. You were born to clarify. You are not here to escape the world. You're here to illuminate it. Because the point of awakening was never to separate from life. It was to finally live it. As Hermstring wrote, when the awakened return to the world, they don't shine to be seen. They shine to remind. And maybe that's your purpose now. To remind the world what it feels like to be real. If this message reached you, it's because your soul is remembering. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are awakening. And the world is afraid of what it can't yet understand. Don't run from your depth. Don't shrink your silence. Don't apologize for seeing what others can't. Every truth you hold was planted in you for a reason, to light a path for those who will come after. Leave your truth below. Tell us what part of your awakening hurts the most, and what part feels like coming home. And if you're ready to keep walking this path with those who see beyond illusion, subscribe, stay close, and let your presence rise among ours. Because this isn't just another channel, it's a sanctuary for the ones who feel too much, see too deep, and love too honestly for a world still asleep. You're not here by accident. You're here because light always finds its reflection.